so much, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. From The Nick to American Gothic to Frances Ha, Juliet Rylance has been part of some of the best TV shows and movies in the last few years. In her new show on AMC, McMafia, Rylance plays a woman whose boyfriend is slowly descending into a global criminal underworld. Let's take a look.
I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I run my own firm. I'm very happy with my life. Because of my family background, I've made it a policy not to invest in Russia.
It is embarrassing to be Russian these days, but don't ever be ashamed of who you are.
Let me guess, you're a gangster.
Close.
Banker?
When I met your father, he was a businessman. And in his business, there was a lot of money. So it was very dangerous. In Russia, they call everyone a gangster.
Your uncle promised I could use your fund to move my money around.
Why would I say yes to you? I'm not a money launderer. I thought maybe you were tired of being the English gentleman.
Neither you nor your family are safe.
What does it take to corrupt you?
Are you head of the family now?
How do I protect them?
By deception, we will do more.
I'm a banker, not a gangster.
These wars are fought in the boardrooms, not on the street. To protect your family, this is what you have to do.
I think there's a lot more that you're not telling me.
It's business.
He's got this beautiful smile, but underneath, do you ever know what he's thinking?
What if you get investigated?
I've done nothing wrong.
Moving money is your weapon.
Do you understand? In Moscow, they kill you!
You have to be ready to give up everything.
You afraid?
Everybody, please welcome Juliet Rylance. Hey.
Hi.
Some lighthearted fun there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I will be honest about something. You know, I watch a lot of TV and a lot of movies for this job, and I have to watch 2-3 episodes, really, of everything that I watch, and I never follow through after the interview to watch the rest of the stuff, just because I have so much other stuff that I have to watch.
Sure.
And this, even just sitting down and watching trailers, like, oh, I want to come back to this. I want to watch the rest of this when the time comes, because it's really fascinating. It's a world that I don't think I've ever seen television approach. It's it's a criminal underworld that is very real, but there's so many tentacles. While it seems very fertile for television, I'm sure it's very daunting for the creators and writers of the show.
Well, firstly, it's great that you want to watch more. That's, I think, what we want. And yeah, it's a really fascinating world to explore. I think that's what hooked me the minute I read the pilot, the first script. It just is a world that I'd kind of known about, but I hadn't really known how much this kind of corporate global crime sort of touches the fabric of our daily lives at every level. And that kind of, I just found fascinating. And the whole thing is so well researched. It's all based on Misha Glenny's book, McMafia. And Misha Glenny really researched that whole world and really was the first person to uncover sort of human trafficking that was happening in Europe at the time. So there's a hell of a lot that's gone into these 8 scripts, and I think audiences are really enjoying.
And the second episode gets into human trafficking right away, which is something that when I tuned in, I was not expecting at all. It's a brutal depiction of that world, as it should be, but it pulls no punches. What did you think when you read that script and saw that episode?
Yeah, I agreed. The episode is quite brutal and hard to watch, but I think that's really the gift of James Watkins, our director, and Hossamini, who wrote these scripts. They haven't shied away or backed away from any of the stuff that they learned from Misha Glenny and from researching that. And they're just brilliant storytellers. James has found such a unique way of telling things, and the whole look of the piece is very real. It's quite gritty, and I think that makes it harder to watch. That there isn't sort of this slick kind of.
There's a darkness, there's shadows to every scene. You know, it's definitely like there's less light and more shadows, which I think complements the material itself.
Yeah, and he did this really wonderful, he made a really wonderful choice early on that each, with our DP, Mark, who's also brilliant, that each location would have a different tone, would have a different color palette. So London, I think, is more yellows. Russia, there's sort of a blue color correct on every piece of material. So there's this fantastic kind of subtle thing that when you're watching the show, you get a real feel for Russia being different from England. And it's sort of the whole thing has been directed like that in a really subtle way, I think.
Did you get to do a fair amount? I mean, it's a silly question for a show like this because it's a very serious show, but did you get to do a bit of traveling for your scenes?
Yes. We spent a lot of time in London, James and I. And then we went to Croatia, and we shot actually the south of France scenes were in Croatia, and a number of other scenes were. And other members of the cast shot in other places too. I think there were 6 locations overall. Yeah, but it was amazing. It was fantastic turning up from foggy, rainy old London and being in Croatia and jumping into the sea, you know, before filming. That was fun. Yeah.
Talk to us about your character and how, if you can, how she's going to become more, I think, intrinsically linked to this world that her partner is sort of becoming engrossed in.
Well, so I play Rebecca Harper, who is, she's a financer. She works in the city. Her and James have this very close relationship. They're very trusting of each other. They've met at Goldman Sachs in New York, and they've come back to London and are trying to do things in the banking world in a slightly different way. Rebecca's working for a sort of an ethical capitalist, someone who made a lot of money and then realizes that actually it's time to give back, and he's set up this fund to try and do sort of good deeds around the world. And she's
We had that conversation downstairs.
We did, yeah. We'll talk about ethical capitalism in a minute. Yeah, so she's very strong. She's very comfortable in her world, and has this wonderful relationship with Alex, played by James. And as his family drama and history sort of seems to start pervading their lifestyle, Alex becomes more and more distant, and I think Rebecca realizes there's something serious wrong. And you sort of see that through the 8 episodes, how this couple, who are so strong together, are really tested.
Because his family and their life is the absolute opposite of ethical capitalism.
Yes, they couldn't be more different. They are a mafia family from Russia living in London. They have this apartment opposite Harrods, and they've been exiled really from Russia.
But it's so interesting because I think that Americans specifically, when they hear the words mafia, they still think of like locally operating, like, you know, guys who have the olive oil storefront or something and are like, you know, taking kickbacks from somewhere to protect other Italians or something in the neighborhood. When the mafia is not that anymore, right? Like what we see here is that it's actually like, it's very much a global enterprise connected to some of our some very high finance, right?
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that I think is most exciting about this show is that, you know, we all know The Godfather and The Sopranos and love. I mean, The Godfather is one of my favorite films.
Part 2.
Part 2, really? Oh, I go 1. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I love 1.
1 is just...
1 is amazing, but the flashback De Niro stuff in 2 is just
amazing.
so beautiful.
All right, okay, 1 and 2, tied.
1 and 2, yeah. We don't talk about 3.
Maybe later we'll talk about 3.
Do you have a soft spot for Godfather 3?
I actually do. I do. I do for the whole thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I would give that another shot.
I think you should give it another shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it rough last time.
Did
but
you?
Fair enough.
Okay. So, you know, what's brilliant about this show is it has all of those elements of The Godfather. There's so many moments that when we were filming, I thought, oh, wow, this is so Michael Corleone right now, what's happening in the scene. And
right, the sun rising up, yeah.
Yeah, and begrudgingly, unwillingly, and how at first, you know, he absolutely does not want to be part of this world at all and does it for the love of family. And as that continues, this dilemma between, am I doing this for my family or am I actually doing it because it feels so good? And I think that's something that the show really highlights, and in a great way. But yes, so it has all those elements, The Sopranos and The Godfather and our classic kind of mafia story. But as you said, it's now people like you and me wearing everyday clothes. There's no differentiation. And I think that's the thing that's scary about the show, is that corporate crime is everywhere. It can be the guy sitting next to you in the cafe who's, you know.
And it's all intrinsically linked to the things that we do on a daily basis
Yeah.
as well. Like
Yeah.
in many ways, we are participators in corporate crime by the things that we use, the iPhones that we have in our pockets, like all of these different things that are just a huge part of our daily lives.
I remember on set, James Norton and I, we kept having moments where we'd come in and go, oh my God, the bank that I've been banking with, I've just realized they're investing in all of this. And we go, oh, I better leave that bank. You better just leave now. And then the next day, our energy provider is investing in this. And as you start looking at all the things that you pay for on a monthly basis, we're supporting a lot of these franchises without knowing it. And so I think that's...
Without knowing it, or... Because I think it was like a decade or two ago that they were finding that a lot of these massive financial institutions opened up their doors to these, to a lot of this, because they were starting to realize that so much capital was actually kind of flowing through these enterprises that they were kind of choking themselves off within capitalism because they weren't taking part in this.
Yeah.
That is not an excuse. That is just sort of the, that's why I say there's no ethical capitalism.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because every day, we're all faced with a question of, do I make this little decision? Do I, really want a coffee? Should I go and get my coffee from here because that's what I want right now? Or should I actually go to the local store and get it from the place that is probably more ethical? And I think,
hopefully, maybe source from... Yeah.
And, it's difficult. You can't spend your whole life, checking every single thing. But I do think that, like Rebecca, and this is where I think she has a really good point, that even if you change 20% of the things that you normally do, or the things that I normally do, that I know I could do better and keep the 80%, that's still going to be a huge change. That's still going to stop a lot of these organizations from functioning.
And it feels better to be at least aware of when you're doing something that, like, maybe you shouldn't have done it, but, like, okay, right now.
Yeah.
But think about it later. Like plastic for me is that thing where it's like, oh, well,
yeah.
So I try not to use it.
Yeah, it's all circulating in an island off the Pacific, isn't it? There's an island that's like Plastic Island now.
It's
all
real
our bottle
bad.
tops. Yeah.
It's real bad.
Yeah. There was actually a great publicity thing that they did in London that the BBC did, where every time people went to a bank, this fraud alert would pop up with an advert about mafia. And the same on your computer when you'd go in to like illegally download a show or something. You'd think you were getting the show, and then James Norton's face would pop up going, hi, you think you've been illegally downloading the show, but did you know that by doing that, you're actually supporting this, and this that's not good? And things like that I think people, just didn't realize.
Yeah. I mentioned in here that you were in the Nick, right?
Yeah.
What was it like being on the show? I always ask people that because I know that Soderbergh was directing every episode in like seemingly 2 weeks, and he was he was behind the camera and editing at night. So as an actor, I'd imagine more so than anything else you'd ever done, you better show up to set prepared and ready to roll.
I think that was the bottom line. Yeah, every day is you really need to be prepared. And very much like this, Soderbergh shot the whole 10 episodes of each season. He block shot them. And we did the same here. So, we'll shoot all the scenes that take place in the Nick, for example, in my family home.
Because all 10 episodes are written.
Yeah, they're all written. So you don't shoot episode by episode. You get all 10 episodes, or in this case, all 8 episodes. And then everything that takes place in the family home will all be shot in the same week or the same couple of weeks. And then everything that takes place in the hospital and the surgery room will be. And so it's a kind of an amazing way to work, because you could come in a day and do a scene from episode 1, then episode 8, then episode 7. And for someone, the way that firstly, the way that Soderbergh prepared for that in the Nick, I don't know how he did it. He's an absolute master. And it was extraordinary to watch him come in and just bounce around like that, totally at ease, directing, behind the camera, editing in the lunch break, coming back, shooting the afternoon, then editing the whole day. It was really extraordinary.
It's really it's really a testament to trusting your gut, I think, right? You show up, you watch a scene, and you go, "This can work in one shot."
Yeah.
Go. Oh,
Yeah.
this needs 2 shots. Or I need to cut around, or maybe we can lose that line. And it's never second guessing in a lot of ways.
No, and I think also preparation, you know, for both the director, like James Watkins, it took him a year to shoot this show and was also block shooting in the same way. But I think preparation both for directors and also for actors is so key because, you know, for me, I had these 8 episodes. I was able to make a huge board of all the different scenes that take place in all the different places and follow kind of an arc through it. And then every time, you know, I shot a scene, I'd write exactly what happened, how I was feeling at the end of the scene, and write it down so that when you come back to it 2 months later, the next scene, you can remember exactly what you were doing as you walked out of the room and then into the next scene. So I think the more you prepare, the looser you can be when you're actually on set.
So are you a big homework doer when it comes to your roles?
I'm a real geek.
That's great,
Yeah, I just think that, you know, the worst thing is to turn up and fumble around and not know what you're doing. And whenever I've done that, it never really serves me very well, so.
You feel vulnerable and you don't feel on top of things and you feel like maybe that's.
I think maybe more it's that you feel, I agree with that, yeah. You feel a sort of level of fear, and fear generally shuts you down. Yeah. Fear kind of makes you clam up and you forget all the different things that you could do or could say, and you can only think of one. And I think that happens in acting. If you haven't prepared, you go, I'll just do this one thing. And actually, if you've prepared, then maybe you've practiced it this way, that way. You've said your lines in the bath. You've said them when you're running. Different thoughts or ideas come into your head. And so when you get to set, you may have 5 different versions in your head.
Do you like to talk about your homework when you get to set, or do you leave the homework behind?
No, I totally leave it behind.
Good.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I don't like the talking on the.
Oh, no, me neither.
What do you think? Why do you think you would do it? Just let me do it.
No, again, like James Watkins on this had such a great ethic on set that really you just came in and we'd rehearse a little bit and then we'd shoot. And he really created an environment that was really playful so that you could just try something totally different. Or it was very free and playful, which was amazing. Yeah.
Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question? Right here.
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
You're kind of a very established British actress in terms of graduated from RADA, set your own production company at a very early age, Theatre of Memory. How do you kind of find your acting style in America versus being a theatre and TV in Britain? Is it very similar, or in terms of preparation, etc.?
It's a really good question. I'm amazed that you know that about the theatre company. Yeah, I think rather than England and America, the biggest difference feels moving from screen to stage. That always feels like they're just very different worlds. And the only thing that I think is the same is the fact that you're, you know, being a character in a story with other people being characters. That's it. Everything else feels very different. So I think it's the same thing, sort of preparation and really just concentrating on the story. I think the bottom line is that we all love stories. I love watching stories. I love telling stories. I like being a storyteller. And if you kind of focus on that and just keep the mission very clear, which is these certain people are going to see this story and see this character relate to these people and then just go from there. I think that's kind of, you know, what you're trying to do anyway, and be as truthful as you can to each medium.
Your stepfather's Mark Rylance, right?
He is.
What was it like to watch him win an Oscar a couple years ago? Because what I loved, well, obviously it was great, but what I loved about him winning the Oscar was like, this is a veteran actor who is beloved by people who know who he is. And as much as I'm sure he was happy to win an Oscar, it didn't really seem like, he was like, let me go back to work. It literally seemed like he was like, yeah, let me go back to work. This is very nice, thanks.
Well, it's a funny thing. There's this big thing that, you know, especially in the theatre and, you know, in the theatre community and film community in New York, and all of my friends who are in the industry have this similar thing, which is if you believe the good reviews, you have to believe the bad ones as well. Like, that's the rule. So kind of when you get, something good happen, it's a bit like, I don't want to pay too much attention to it because then I've got to pay attention to all the people going, I hate what he did in this, or I hate what she did in this. So, it was amazing. He loved it. He was so thrilled to win.
I think I saw him in his play at St. Anne's Warehouse, like the day after he won, or 2 days before. I was like, what are you doing here, man?
It was amazing.
Did you have to get your picture taken somewhere? Like, what are you doing?
It was actually a really fun night because Spielberg sent a plane and flew him out, and then I think he had to do press until 7 a.m, and then all the BBC breakfast press, and which I was having to kind of coordinate and negotiate, having never done, and then they both, Mum and Dad, got back for the show, and I think he actually popped out of the ice on this play with his Oscar, from an ice hole, sort of. No, he loved it, but I guess that's the thing, is you've got to try and stay as level-headed about all of that as possible. Otherwise, you stop being able to do what you love to do, which is, be somebody else and tell a story.
Next question. Hi.
Hi. So did you read the book of Misha Glenny that the show is based on, and was she involved at all in the production?
Yeah, I did read the book, and if you like the series, do read the book, because the book is extraordinary. Misha was very involved. He worked, obviously James Watkins, our director, and Haas spoke to him quite a lot, and had a lot of meetings when they were writing the scripts. And then he came to set quite often and popped in and was just incredibly supportive of the whole thing. And as far as I know, he sent me an email saying he really likes it. So he was very involved. And Misha's a really extraordinary person and reporter, and I can't really believe that he would actually go and hang out, with these franchises, Mafia. And the whole reason the show is called Mafia is because he was sort of with this Mafia franchise in Chechnya, and they were so brutal and such a kind of terrifying franchise that they would actually franchise out their name to other Mafia groups if they were brutal enough. So sort of a mob group would call up going, we just did this. And they go, how bad was it? And they'd say, this bad. And they go, okay, you can use our name. So it was a bit like McDonald's having these, fast food chains all around the world. It was the same sort of idea.
I think we have time for one more.
Hi. So I was wondering, since you're on the show and you like the Godfather trilogy, are there any other mafia movies or TV shows that you're fond of?
Yeah, I mean, I said it sort of as well, The Sopranos. I just think it's just the best. It's just an incredible, epic story. And a friend of mine was watching the whole thing recently, and I sort of got really, he's watching the whole, series. And I went in and watched a couple episodes and just thought, this holds up today. It's so brilliant.
I dipped back in recently, like over the holidays, and it's just wonderful. And one of the best things about The Sopranos is that as much as it's an epic story, it's episodic in a lot of ways. Yeah. There are beautiful stories in each episode. Yeah. And you don't actually get that, I think, as much anymore. Like, everything is very serialized. And The Sopranos came from this world of, 80s television where David Chase was from. So he's like, sure, I guess it's serialized, but, this is how I know how to tell stories. So each episode has these great one-offs,
And the other one is The Wire. I love The Wire.
This is kind of has I wouldn't say it's similar to The Wire, but I think it's trying to do the kind of the tentacles. This is
that's true.
Yeah, The Wire is all about all of these different institutions within a city that affect sort of these stories, and this is kind of all of the institutions that are part of global crime.
Yes, yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Also, it's his birthday. If you want to say happy birthday,
Happy
Randy.
Birthday. I won't ask how old you are.
Juliet, I love the show. Congratulations on the show and all your great work. It is on Monday nights on AMC. There's about, 5 episodes left of this season?
Yes.
Tune in. It's a great, great, great show. Juliet Rylance, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you so much.